Humanex Ventures presents Inside the Coaching Mind. Terry Pettit coached the University of Nebraska's first national championship team in 1995 and put the state of Nebraska on a path to volleyball greatness. Now, Terry mentors coaches, writes books, and gives talks about leadership and team building to corporate and business audiences. Here's Coach Pettit to take us inside the coaching mind.
Thank you, David Young. And I also want to thank Humanex Ventures and Brad Black, who recruit, mentor, develop, and extraordinary talent. We have an extraordinary talent with us today, former Freeman Falcon left side hitter, Dani Busboom-Kelly, who coincidentally is the new head coach for the University of Nebraska women's volleyball. Dani, people are vaguely aware, we live in Fort Collins now, people are vaguely aware that some of them that I used to coach at Nebraska, and some of them in the last month have come up and said, well, did they hire the right person? And here's the answer that I've given them. I said, well, let me put this in perspective for you. When Pat Sullivan became the first coach at the University of Nebraska women's volleyball program, she'd been a grad assistant at Smith College for a year and coached swimming. When I became the head coach, I'd coached 3 years at a junior college. When John Cook became the head coach, he'd won a Big Ten championship, but had never been to a Final Four. The woman they just hired has taken her team to 3 Final Fours, 2 national championship matches, and has been National Coach of the Year. Does that answer your question?
I like that answer.
Well, you know, it's neat that you're from Adams, Nebraska, but to me, that's not the most important reason why you're the best fit for this job. You've got, from the outside looking in, you have wonderful emotional intelligence. I like the fact that you're collaborative. There's just so many things to do in this business anymore that the idea of a head coach trying to be in charge of anything is absurd. It's really not possible. And I sense that you're collaborative in your work with Dan Meschke, who was your associate head coach at Louisville. I want to ask you a couple things about Louisville that kind of intrigued me. One was, is there any more pressure than trying to get to a national championship when the Final Four is held in your own community?
That ranks pretty high up there, I'd say, in the coaching world, is getting the opportunity to play for a national championship in your home state, let alone in your city. And for us, it was even in our home arena. So it was pretty crazy to even have that opportunity. And we felt pressure all year, and it was tough to manage that and not get ahead of ourselves. But luckily our players were wonderful, last year at Louisville, and thought they were excellent at handling that pressure.
Yeah, I watched your match with Northern Iowa, and sometimes to compete for national championship, you have to get through a match like that. First of all, Northern Iowa was an exceptional team, but in that 5th set, if you look at the box score, Northern Iowa won, but they didn't. And they missed, they got to the point where they might have been in position to win, and then they felt pressure and missed several serves. The thing that I thought helped you a lot, and tell me if I'm wrong about this, but Anna DeBeer and your libero, you have to share her name with me. Yeah, Elena Scott, both from Louisville. To me, there's something different when somebody is on a team locally that they, I don't know that they have. Well, when I think of you, when I think of Lindsay Wishmeyer, when I think of Jordan Larson, I think of grit. And Jordan was going to be recruited wherever she was. But, I was the one who recruited Lindsay, and she was a setter, but that wasn't her overwhelming talent to me. The talent was grit. She was not going to let go. I sensed the same thing with you. Um, does that, are those kids going to be recruited by a program like Nebraska in the future when most of the recruits, if you look at the roster, are kids from all over the country who've played on a U19 team?
Hmm. Yeah, well, Elena Scott and Anna DeBeer, I think both were recruited, but not at as high a level as they should have been. And especially Anna DeBeer, she was carrying her club team and high school team, you know, at every match. And so she was amazing. And then with Elena, we had to get creative and think about how do we move her positions and how do we make her a part of our team? Because at the time we didn't have a scholarship for a setter, and that's what she played her whole life. And we had to take some risks there, but so did she. And I think that also paid off in the Final Four. Is Anna had a little bit of a chip on her shoulder. She didn't get a ton of huge school or what you'd consider big school offers. And then Elena, she took a risk on us and we took a risk on her. And I think there was a lot to continue to prove. But to answer your question is, of course, we're going to recruit, players from Nebraska. And I was speaking at a luncheon yesterday and I told them, you're probably going to see somebody switch positions in the next few years just because I love recruiting athletes just like you did and John did, and getting them to fit, getting them on the court, finding a way for them to fit and watching them develop.
Well, I don't know of any extraordinary player that doesn't have a chip on their shoulder. So
Sure.
what was Dani Busboom's chip?
My chip, man, well, I think just when I moved positions, that was a chip on my shoulder my senior year is to stay on the court and prove that I belonged at Nebraska. Um, I think that was the biggest one.
Uh-huh. That was your motivation.
Yeah.
Uh, we read about the major stresses in life, and three of them are moving, uh, having a baby, getting a new job. Okay, you've had all three in the last 6 months. I don't think, including myself, I don't think men have any appreciation for the challenges of being a mother and coaching, of having a baby and coaching, and how that challenge might make you a better coach.
Hmm.
Can you talk about that?
For sure. I don't know if it makes me a better coach. I think it helps me relate to our players a little bit better. I think it helps certainly at Louisville, maybe not as much at Nebraska yet, but help me relate to our staff. And I'm not a very empathetic person by nature, but I think being a mom has brought that out in me. So I think that's been really good for coaching, especially in the world we live in right now. But of course, it's a huge challenge, and I think it changes every day, and you learn something new about it every day, what it's like to be a mom and coach, and you really just need to like the time management is so important, but on top of that, just the communication. And I work really hard and remind myself consistently to make sure my team and my staff, they know what I'm doing. So if I leave camp early, I'm honest. I'm like, hey, I'm gonna spend this evening with my sons because we start, next week and I won't be at camp this session. And I just think making sure they hear that and know that that's okay, that just helps the understanding of the group. And then they're not afraid to ask or if they really need something or something's important to them. So the communication is definitely key.
Well, you said something very transparent and I think important there when you said, I became more empathetic when I had a kid. And there's the kind of a yin and a yang of coaching. um, you have to require and you have to relate. And so what you're saying is the requiring was easier for me, but when I had my own kid, I was able to relate better. Is that a fair statement?
Definitely. And relating in the fact of, I don't know, just you want your kid, everything perfect for your child, and you want experiences for them, and I want to make sure that I'm even more conscious about creating those for my players.
Yeah. You mentioned Anna DeBeer. Anna DeBeer was one of my favorite college players of all time. And I don't consider myself a fan. You know, when I watch matches, I usually, unless Nebraska's playing, I'm not really emotionally involved. But I became a fan of hers. Uh,
Hmm.
she almost had what appeared to be a stoic attitude. But I also know there were challenges for her. In the Creighton match 2 years ago, she was subbed out, came back in, played better, and Louisville won.
Hmm.
Um, she also had injuries.
Hmm.
How much, how much, how much was your, or how important was your relationship with her in coaching her through those challenges?
I'll be honest, Terry, she's one of a kind. I don't think many athletes, players are built like her. We can say nowadays, but I think in general, for all time, just the way she approaches everything, especially in the sport of volleyball. So I don't think my coaching really made her who she was or gave her this great career. She already had that in her. And I think she's one of those players that probably would have been fantastic anywhere she went. I think Louisville in general just gave her a platform because she was from Louisville. I think the way our staff works, it just really allowed her to be a star and be the center and really gain a lot of traction where, people like you who don't live anywhere near Louisville are becoming a fan. Um, but I don't want to take any credit for Anna DeBeer because I mean, I want to, but I'm not going to. So, um,
Well, you know,
she
and
was,
maybe you see this too. There are people on teams we coached against that I'll say, boy, I would like to have coached that kid. Anna
yeah,
DeBeer is somebody I would have loved to coach, and I can't imagine any coach that wouldn't.
right.
It was interesting to me in your match with Pitt in the semifinals of the Final Four when she had her injury that took her out of the match. It seemed to affect Pitt more than it did Louisville. Is is now I don't explain that dynamic to me.
Well, I mean, Pitt had already they'd already kind of dialed their lineup a little bit, for game four. So I think they were already feeling some pressure going into game four. Um, but I think we had that little burst of energy that teams get when something happens where, you kind of have this out of body experience. And I didn't even remember saying this, but Charity Looper said in the press conference after, like, Dani just looked at us and said, like, you know, this is not a big deal. We're going to win this game. And I don't remember saying that or having that presence because inside I was thinking, oh shit, we're not going to win this game. So,
No, but
um, and, but the fact that, the way we train our practices, I think our team was pretty confident that Peyton would come in and she wasn't going to be the reason we lost. We might not have won, but she wasn't going to cause us to lose that game.
no, and that we're talking about that's Bobby Peterson's
Yeah,
daughter.
Peterson, who
Yeah,
came in for Anna. Yeah.
right. Yeah, and man, I remember John and I used to have this conversation. We want to recruit coaches' kids.
Yeah.
You know, they and the next step is teachers' kids. They get things maybe in a little different way. They're more likely to be great competitors. They're servant leaders.
Hmm.
But that was a really interesting dynamic to me when that happened.
Hmm.
Um, uh, when I posted that you were going to be a guest, and The questions that follow my Facebook page, you can imagine what they are. But the first one is, who's going to play opposite? So you've got three potential people there. You have a Ryan Campbell, who's a freshman. You have a lady that came in that had played professional volleyball in Italy. You have a transfer from Baylor. Um, I'm also curious whether or not you ever looked at Taylor Landfair as a right side player, because she has a great block. She would have fewer defensive responsibilities.
Mhm.
But I'm guessing at this point you may or may not know. It may be several matches into the season, and to me, the maybe the most important requirement in that position is the ability to attack balls when the setter digs the ball,
Mhm.
and the libero sets the ball. What's your thinking on having all those options?
Well, they were all either committed when I got hired or, being recruited when I got hired. So I think there was already a plan in place to be able to use multiple opposites and not have to rely on one player. So I think that was smart because you had Ryan Hunter coming off an injury that she had in high school, and Ali Check wasn't going to be on campus until June, and Virginia, the opposite from Italy, she was kind of a wild card. Like, is this going to work out? Is she going to be eligible? So there was a lot of question marks with all three of them. And honestly, I haven't been in the gym with them other than camp demos, which are, as you know, short, like 30 minutes here and there. So I couldn't tell you who's going to be our opposite, but from what I've seen, it's going to be a battle. I'll I'll put it that lightly, and um, I think they're all going to be very different personalities and very different styles of play.
Well, the lady from Italy, she played professional volleyball.
Hmm.
So does that mean that as long as your clock hasn't passed, that anybody that plays professional volleyball would be eligible to play NCAA volleyball?
I think it depends on how old you are. So yes, when you graduated high school, how long of a gap there's been there, but also have you received necessary living expenses or have you received more? So the NCAA does quite a vetting process, which I learned with Virginia, of what she received as a pro, um, what they consider normal living expenses, what like a scholarship would be versus actual making a ton of money as a pro.
Uh-huh.
So I don't think there's not a black, white, and white answer there. I think it's very case by case.
Uh-huh. Do you anticipate that it's possible that whoever wins that position, or maybe you alternate, that they could be play six rotations and attack out of the back row?
Yeah, I think it could be possible. We've got some really good depth at DS, so I think they have to be pretty great at attacking out of the back row to warrant putting one of our DSs on the bench. So we'll see, but we'll train them to do that, of course, and we'll use them even if that's not our specific rotation. Every single match, we'll use them when we feel like we need them. So I don't think Allie, she didn't attack out of the back row. The young lady from Baylor a ton. She didn't play back row, and Ryan Hunter really didn't play a ton of back row in club, and um, obviously Virginia's played the most back row playing pro, where they have limited substitutions. So we'll see.
And it may not be as necessary
Right.
if the left side hitter, opposite, who am I thinking of? Opposite Harper is a six rotation
Yeah.
player, and she's also attacking out of the back row. So that's the second question these fans all want to know: who's most likely going to be opposite Harper Murray, and how many people do you think will compete for that position?
Well, Taylor Landfair is back, um, and Skylar Pierce is back. She redshirted last year, and then we have Terea Stiegler, who's a freshman, who was here in the spring. So I've gotten to work with all three of them quite a bit. And just kind of like the opposites. They're very different in their skill set, but they're all very talented. And again, I think it's going to be a difficult decision. But, I'll tell you, the two players that have been in the gym the most this summer are Taraya and Skylar Pierce. So they are both, in my opinion, on another level from what they were in May when, we finished our spring season. So they've been really impressive. Just, again, the camp demos I've seen, and that they are two players that seem like they're on a mission and they understand that there's going to be some serious competition. And then I think Taylor is, 23 now, and she has a way different approach because she's feeling the effects of playing for 5 years and battling injuries. And so she's doesn't have the capacity to really physically do what those other guys are doing, doing extra reps every single day and getting in the gym. But, she brings so much experience and leadership that those other two don't have yet.
Yeah. Well, Tarea reminds me of somebody, and this may not make sense to anybody but me, because she's 6'3", and
It's more like 6'1", 6'2".
okay, she's a
Yeah.
presence. She's a
Yeah.
physical presence. But she reminds me of Kathy Noth, who was much smaller, 5'9". But Kathy Noth was a physical presence, could grab the rim, also had tremendous balance. And when
Mm-hmm.
I watch Ziegler play, I see she's balanced. Her, that I don't see her. Um, uh, it's how you land is important. How you move is important. So she strikes me as somebody that is has tremendous potential.
Yeah.
Um, the the third question is, I watched your match, your spring match in a high school, and your freshman setter had the chance to set, and I was impressed. I was impressed with her platform and her location,
Mm-hmm.
and I thought, wow, this is pretty interesting. So is is she going to be competing as well, or is she redshirting, or is there the possibility?
Yeah, I think we'll start out competing for sure, and I think Bergen will be challenged more than she has the last 2 years, and Campbell certainly capable, I think, of running the offense for this team. But if I'm not saying she won't redshirt, it's just we're definitely not going to start the season with that mindset because I think
Yeah,
she's got she's more than her location is just the way she plays. I think brings out a different side to the team, and that's pretty interesting to watch and really feel like, are we going to need this? And we'll get some tests early on. Obviously with Pitt and Stanford, we're going to be challenged from day one.
well, at the libero position, you've got several people, including Chobo and Mach.
Mm-hmm.
They're both great players. And I posed this to John last year, and he said, no way would I consider this. But I said, well, what if one passes the ball better against a particular opponent, and the other maybe has more range against a particular opponent? Would you consider using both people in the same position?
Yeah, I mean, maybe, but I just feel like that DS spot can have such an impact if somebody's in there for full 3 rotations and not coming out, that it's hard to put one of them or put them both in the libero jersey because you would lose that,
Right.
or special that option. Like, let's say all our pins are going 6 rotations, but there's going to be a lot of moments where all three of them will have to come out, in my opinion, and so you'd lose that. So I don't anticipate doing that, but just like everything, never say never.
Right, right. Well, the Husker fans are excited. They sense that Nebraska is going to run a little bit faster offense, maybe with some more movement.
Mhm.
What's your thinking on that?
Yeah, we'll go a little bit faster. I don't think we'll be like speedy. It's not going to be super noticeable. I definitely would say we'll have a lot more movement. We got the athletes to do it, and we have the setters are both fantastic, so they can do it too. I'm a little bit more of a risk taker, so that's kind of when I think about movement. I mean, when it doesn't work, you might look silly, but when it does, it can change the momentum of a match.
Well, yeah, but your risk taking, Danny, I think is built on trust.
Hmm.
You went to a 5-1, shifted out of a 6-2 at a 5-1 in the final four.
Hmm.
And I thought if you didn't make that move, that you might not have won.
Hmm.
I thought it was a courageous move. I also saw that when you played Pitt, you did different things with your right side player.
Hmm.
And in the second rotation, she retracted back, hit a two ball. Pitt didn't pick it up through most of the match. That's a play we ran with both Nancy Metcalf, Mendering, and Lisa Reitzma. We would move them anywhere on the court, and I love that type of creativity. I would love it if down the road, if you had the right player playing opposite, that setter could dig the ball to that left-handed right side player, and she could attack, set a
Yeah.
quick, set the slide. Um, right now, everybody's doing the same thing, digging the ball to a libero. Last year, Nebraska's libero bump set the ball, and I didn't quite understand that because in
Hmm.
previous years she'd set it with her hands. Would Mach and Chobo, would they both use their hands to set out of that position?
Oh yeah, they now with no doubles, I don't see the value in bump setting unless you have to. So
I don't either. And
yeah,
and I and you know I say why not set a bic? Why
yeah.
not? Um, Somebody's going to do that,
Hmm.
and it's going to scare the heck out of an opponent. You were in the stands when Nebraska was playing Penn State, and they're up 22-16. I don't know that I have ever seen what we saw that night. I've never seen in a Final Four a team come back down by that margin with teams at that level. What were you thinking as you watched it? That's the first part of the question.
I
And
wasn't
then,
thinking about Penn State or Nebraska, to be honest. I was thinking about Anna DeBeer's ankle. So
well, yeah, you knew she has the type personality that if they cut off her foot, she was going to try to play. But uh, but no, you had to be watching that. Uh, have you gone back and looked at that videotape of that fourth set?
yeah, I've watched it. I've watched quite a bit, and that set, and then the fifth set, I've watched quite a
Right,
bit. Yeah.
right, right. And what what is your I have some opinions on this, but I'm curious what your opinion is. What do you think contributed to Nebraska not winning the fourth set? What issues would a fan recognize? But what issues would an experienced like coach like you recognize?
You know, I think it's very hard to judge a team based on the film, but I've talked to some of the players, and I don't think anybody can really put their finger on like what happened or why. But there's tipping when you have a great set is I think a normal fan would recognize, and then but there's even plays where in game five Harper passed the ball and it kind of went straight up, but it goes out of the picture, so it's high enough and it's nice, but it lands inside the lines. It's like that nobody even went for it. So I feel like there was some. Yes, it was a bad pass, and fans might think, "Oh, that was a great serve," but the fact that that ball dropped to me, it was just a lack of, or like fear was coming in, and like a lack of leadership really came out in those big moments. But no, when I got to Nebraska this spring, it felt like it was not that big of a deal. And it became a big deal in our gym in Louisville. Like if a ball is inside the lines, it should never ever hit the ground. It was crazy. We were having balls hit the ground constantly. And they got much better at that as it went on. But it was just, that to me is a communication thing and a trust thing. It's not about effort or skill. So
No, you took the word that I would use, a lack of leadership. And, as I look at, again, I'm 800 miles away, but as I look at the team, I can see leadership in Becca Alec. She strikes me as that she's asserting herself, and I see a lot of growth in Harper Murray.
mhm.
But the position that has to have great leadership is the setter position. I used to say, if your setter is not your team captain or a team captain, then you've got the wrong person in the setter position.
Mhm.
Now, that some people might think that's harsh, but I'll tell you a story. When Christy Johnson didn't become the starting setter till her fourth year, so she'd not been on the court in the position. But that spring, when I had the team vote for the team captain, it was unanimous, including her.
Mhm.
Everybody knew, she was going to hold people accountable. Um, so how are you dealing with that issue?
Yeah, well, I think, just we had an open vote for captain this spring, and um I told them we're voting for captains tomorrow, and we're going to do it in a group, and we're going to kind of do a live vote. And Bergen won by a landslide. So we're certainly on the right path. And she was the only one. I said, if anybody has 4 votes or more, they're going to be a captain. And she's the only one that had more than 4 votes. So, and other players had 3 and 4. They didn't have more than 4. So I think the team has a lot of respect for Bergen. It's just
Right.
coming out in those big moments, what that looks like. And I think she's ready to take on that role. And I think Campbell Flynn has some natural leadership qualities that you want in big moments. She's a risk taker, for example. And so I think they both, like, we're going to benefit from that this year. Is Bergen's really grown as a leader, and Campbell has some natural qualities that maybe Bergen hasn't let come out yet.
Uh-huh. Can you help develop that? And if so, how? Can you give an
Yeah,
example?
you know, I just the coach player relationships, particularly the coach setter relationship, in my opinion, is extremely important, and our team needs to know that, like, I'm going to be behind the setters, and I'll tell them up front, like, these aren't my favorite people per se, but they're my favorite players, and I'm going to give them the most attention. And we're going to build a relationship where is really has a high level of trust, but that's going to come from some hard work, watching a ton of film together, having a lot of meetings, and I'm always going to ask the setters their opinions about things first. But the rest of the team knows that. So hopefully, in those crunch moments, the setters are the most confident players on the team. And um, I also never am going to come down on a setter in front of the whole team. That's just kind of my style. I think part of it's being a setter myself, but I also
Well,
think
I
it's
think what you're saying is brilliant. I mean, I think you're asking them to take the most risk, and you can only do that if you build trust, and
mhm,
trust takes time. So you can't do that with, you don't have the time to do that with every player,
mhm.
but you can do that in that position. I'm going to go through some players here, and um, if you could tell me what you think their talent is, and I separate kind of talent and skill, but so I'm looking at your Andy Jackson, who Certainly an explosive slide hitter. Um, I don't think she was as strong a blocker maybe as Layla Blackwell last year, or certainly not as strong as Rebecca Alec, who's one of the best blockers in the country. What does she really do well? What does she have to get better in?
Mm. I was thinking more of a not skill. I think what Andy separates her, this is probably a tangent off your question, is she's one of the most high profile athletes on our team. Fans love her. She was invited to the VNL roster. But I think she's one of our most humble players and a continual learner. So I think she has a really great she has a great self-awareness of what she needs to get better at. But I mean, hitting a slide is not one of those things. So, we're going to keep her behind the setter as much as possible. And she's really improved in her blocking. I think she knows she has to get better. And I think she just has tweaked it a little bit to particularly be better like one-on-one against an opposing middle and against a Bic at taking up more space.
Uh-huh. When in that fourth set, when the passing broke down, some passing broke down, maybe the setting broke down, decisions. The one thing that Nebraska needed at that point, they didn't have, and that was a pin hitter that could go up and get a kill when you're out of system. What player on the team can play that role?
I think they all can. It's hard because our pin players are not our biggest jumpers like a lot of programs. But they all have the ability to do it because they're all very, very smart players. So I think boils down to trust. Are you going to trust it to tool the block, or are you going to trust it to throw it down and making great decisions for those guys? But it's a challenge because they physically can't just go up and get it over the block like a Logan Eggleston or Maddie Skinner, but they can kill the ball out of system.
Yeah, and perhaps with more movement, a
Mm-hmm.
player like Harper Murray goes up 30 points in attack percentage, I would think.
Yeah.
Running more left ends, more coming up the middle of the court. Um, what what what's I'm not talking about the physical difference, but what are the talents of Chobo and Mach? What do they do that make them exceptional?
Mach is an exceptional passer. She's very steady. You know what you're going to get from her every single day in practice, matches. I think there's a comfort in that, especially at the libero position, is just somebody that you can really, whether you've had a great conversation with her or not, you know what you're going to get from her as a person and a player. I think Choboy makes electric plays. She's an exceptional defender. She does stuff that I haven't seen very many liberos do, and she's also an exceptional athlete. I think that gets lost just how athletic Choboy is. Um, it's almost deceiving because she's so quick. It's like, oh, you think that was just an average play, but it really was an exceptional play. She can do a lot just based on her athleticism.
Right. Uh, Back to the other middle blocker, Rebecca Alec. Um, does she have a chip?
I think she just in general as a person has a chip. She's pretty feisty and yeah, she's hopefully going to be able to carry the level she was at this spring for 5-6 months from August to December because she was pretty unbelievable this spring.
We've mentioned Sigler. Is there any other freshman that might be in the mix?
I mean, Ryan Hunter had the opposite had a great spring. I think she proved that she can do it in a match, which was a tough task for her, and she played great. I think Carrie Leinbach has one of the best serves on the team, so she could find herself in a role. And then we have two middle blockers, and both of them, again, they got here in June, so I haven't had much opportunity to really work with them. But I would imagine that as much as you can challenge Andy and Becca, that they're going to challenge them. But Andy and Becca are pretty good. So I think that's so we'll see if those guys can really break in at a starting role. But hopefully most everybody in our team is going to have an opportunity to impact a match throughout the season. And I think they've all, up to this point, have earned it.
Well, you kept the previous staff as your staff, and my guess is had Louisville not wanted Dan to be the head coach there, you might have brought him in with you. Does Jalen assume a little larger role this next year than maybe he had before? Maybe he may have had a huge role beyond recruiting and of course he was beside the court calling defenses and things. But talk about your staff a little bit and what you see their primary role is.
Yeah, I feel like Jalen's role probably is not changing much, from what he was doing with John. Still going to be the recruiting coordinator, and he'll run the defense. And but I think Kelly Hunter, we could expect more from her. And I think she's a really good coach, and has a great knack for relating to players in a positive way, but being able to not be their best friend and have honest, real conversations with them. And then I think Brennan, who was an interim coach, and I decided to keep him on till December, and I would imagine longer. Things are going well. He's got a really good volleyball mind, and he's, really studies more volleyball than any assistant I've had in the past. And so he's already brought in some really cool things. And what I love about him is he wants to do, he has an idea, but he finds evidence, video evidence or something to show me like, hey, can I try this? And can we do this? So he's been working with the middles, and I think that's really going to pay off, especially for somebody like Andy, who can do a lot of physical things from an attacking standpoint. So I think Jalen will be the same. I think Kelly will have a little bit bigger role. Brennan certainly will have a much bigger role. And, Brennan or Kelly will call the serves. John always called service zones. So I think that's a very underrated role at Louisville. I had my assistant Todd Chamberlain do that, and he took a lot of time into, studying what he wanted to do. So that'll be a big role for one of them. But then with couple positions, Kelly was the setter coach. Well, I'm going to coach the setters, and the liberos, I think, kind of got lost, and they do that a lot on staffs. But now with the fourth coach, we can have a dedicated person to liberos, which is going to be Kelly Hunter, and I think that's really important because it's going to be a super tight race, right? Like who's going to wear the jersey, and Brendan will coach the middles, and then I shifted Jalen to the outsides. And Jalen probably has the loudest voice in our gym, and those players touch the ball the most and are required to do the most. And I thought he could really push them and give them a lot of feedback throughout a practice. So that's how we kind of changed our roles.
Yeah, one of the questions that somebody asked that I certainly wouldn't have thought of. Zach Kroll asked, future of the beach season. I think my inclination would be rest, but I know John really valued that, thought it was important, said the players loved it. What's your thought on the future of the beach season?
Well, I don't know if it's going to totally be in my hands, with the way the landscape's changing. Number one, the funding for it, but number two, Title IX. I know Troy's already talked about adding a women's sport. What sport's that going to be? So I can't imagine he'd want to get rid of a women's sport, which beach volleyball is counted as a separate sport. So when I got hired, I thought I would want to get rid of it. Like, I don't want to do beach. And then when I got here, and after talking to the players and watching more, then I was like, well, I don't think I'd want to get rid of it yet. So I think we'll definitely be keeping it for at least another year. And then we'll see, again, if it's in my control or not. But I was really impressed when I got to Nebraska in February, just the way the players were approaching the beach season. And I remember as assistant, we had it, and it felt more like fun and games. And we really didn't even compete at a high level. Well, I thought this team this year was competing at a very high level, even if they weren't having success. And I was just really impressed. So that's why they changed my mind. And I definitely want to keep it for at least a little bit longer, but we'll see.
John initiated balls in practice. He was very active. I tended to walk around the court and watch what was happening and make interjections. What is your role in practice?
Oh, I'm pretty active. So definitely, when we get in our position training, really active with the setters, and I'll be the one tossing the balls, hitting the balls, not jumping and hitting off the balls. Nobody wants to see that. But, and, I love to run certain drills and to be in the mix. And I think that's a fun way to interact with your team as well. But during 6-on-6, I like to walk around and kind of try to catch everybody in certain moments.
Yeah, the conference is not going to get any easier. When you look at the right side player that Penn State added, you look at the development. Wisconsin added a great outside hitter from Oregon. They have one of the best setters in the league. It's going to be exciting when you do the pre-conference season. If I gave you a choice, and this is an unfair choice, of winning every pre-conference match or putting different people under stress and evaluating how they respond, what would be your choice?
Well, I think, the non-conference has become incredibly important to win. So it's hard to say I wouldn't want to win every game, because you're fighting for that top 4 seed. And really, one loss can make or break that in the non-conference. So, of course, I want to win, but I've always been a firm believer that, what we do in August has got to set us up to be great in December. And our teams at Louisville always did a really good job of understanding that. So that understanding that everything we're doing, changes we're making, they just had to trust the coaches were always thinking about how we were going to be great in the tournament. So I'm sure there'll be a lot of change. I'll definitely want to see players under stress.
Right.
But hopefully you can come away with both, the wins, and you got to evaluate a few things.
Right. 17 players on the roster. And what did you normally carry at Louisville?
Between 17 and 19. And we had 21. I mean, that's not my ideal number, but it would just happen.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's hard to get reps, and you wonder how people, are going to hang in there if they're shagging balls and they aren't getting court time. One of the last questions I want to ask you is one that I certainly wouldn't have thought of, but Tanya Aspergren, I don't know if she's related to Kelly, I think probably she is, says, anything fashion-wise in the works for December, like a special Adidas jacket?
Well, I'll put a plug for the Adidas Gucci collab to come back for one in December, but not yet. Being postpartum, I feel like I gotta get back to myself and feel a little bit better. But I'm sure that bug will come, and I'm not going to disappoint Nebraska fans in December with fashion. So.
Well, Dani, I, like everyone else, was thrilled that you're getting this opportunity, and you are the right person at the right time, and you know, this program just gets better and better all the time, and I'm
Thank
sure
you.
that's going to happen. I really appreciate what you're going to do for Nebraska volleyball.
Thank
I
you.
also want to thank Brad Black again and Humanex Ventures, because without them, we couldn't have conversations like we did today with Dani. And we'll look forward to seeing everybody next time.
Inside the Coaching Mind is presented by Humanex Ventures and is pleased to be a part of the Learfield Varsity Podcast Network. If you're on Facebook, look for the Inside the Coaching Mind group and join a vibrant discussion of volleyball and leadership. TerryPettit.com is where you'll find Terry's books, writings, and downloads, as well as subscription links for all your podcast apps.